Excellencies, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to welcome you to the signing ceremony for the establishment of the annual EU Day for the victims of global climate crisis. We will start today's ceremony with a musical performance of Mater Dolorosa from the Rain Requiem. I will now invite the representatives of the 3 EU institutions to deliver their commemorative remarks. Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans for the European Commission.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much, ladies, for this wonderful performance. Deputy Prime Minister, Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for all being here. 3 institutions of the European Union have decided that on the 15th of July, from now on, we will commemorate annually the victims of the climate crisis. Why the 15th of July? Because exactly 2 years ago, on the 15th of July, 4 of our member states were hit by torrential rains. You know, these so-called static rains, enormous amounts of water pouring down in one place. And as a consequence of that, in especially Belgium and Germany, more than 200 people lost their lives. Now, this was an event caused, clearly, by the climate crisis. And the climate crisis has a propensity to create many, many erratic weather patterns. It doesn't mean that every individual storm that hits Europe or hits other parts of the world is directly attributable to the climate crisis, but it is a fact that weather patterns are changing and changing rapidly. It's also a fact that the temperature is on the rise. We've had, I think, 4 of the hottest days ever on record last week. We see people dying because of heat stress. We see arable lands disappearing, and the risk of people starving because of that is increasing. We see also wildfires causing deaths. We also see that, for instance, excessive heat has a huge influence on society. Whenever the heat goes up extremely, gender-based violence increases. And all these things are linked to the fact that our climate is changing and changing so rapidly. And when we say this is a European Day, we say it to commemorate all victims worldwide. And we do have the hope that this idea of an annual commemoration of those who perished will also take hold in other parts of the world. This is important to us. Now, we're all part of the circle of life. We are born, and at some point we die. If we're lucky enough to be able to live life's full circle, then we are still mourned when we die. People will miss us. People will mourn. But if death occurs because of accidents, prematurely, especially if it affects children, this creates such suffering, such mourning. You know, for parents, the natural thing of life is that you die before your children. If that doesn't occur and the opposite occurs, this is a heartbreaking thing. And this is happening more and more across the planet, also as a consequence of the climate crisis. Now, the music you've heard is part of an incredible piece the text is written by a Belgian writer whom I deeply admire, David van Rijbroek. What he did is, after the floods, he took the time to go and speak to the people in the affected area in Belgium, went to their homes, asked them what happened, asked their feelings, and spoke to a mother who had lost her son, etc., etc. And he took their words literally and put them in literature. So the strength of those words is incredible, but emphasized, increased enormously by the wonderful music by Jeff Neve. And this created an opera, I would call it, that would have value for the whole world to hear, because it's the testimony of people who underwent such a horrible event. quite literally using their words. And how David then worded, and I say it in English, but it's originally in Dutch and French, but he says, "Forgive us, friends, for we know what we do." Of course, you know the biblical reference where it says we don't know what we do. But here, forgive us, friends, for we know what we do. Forgive us, friends, for we do not what we know. Or in French, pardonnez-nous, mes amis, car nous savons ce que nous faisons. Pardonnez-nous, mes amis, car nous ne faisons pas ce que nous savons. In other words, we know what's happening, and we're not acting in a commensurate way to this. And that's why we're having also the meeting here today, to get the international community to react in a way that is commensurate to the challenge we face. Humanity still has an opportunity to not descend into climate disaster. But that can only happen if we act now. And we owe it to all those who have fallen victim and who will fall victim in the future. We owe it to them to commemorate them and to use the memory of their sacrifice as a driving force to do the right thing for next generations. We owe it to those whom we've lost to be good ancestors to those who are still to come. Thank you very much.
I now invite Deputy Prime Minister of Spain, Teresa RIBERA, for the presidency of the Council of the European Union. Over to you.
Thank you, Alina. Thank you all for being here today, and thanks, Frans, for these very beautiful words that come after just such a beautiful song, such a beautiful performance. It is a day of emotion. It is a day to remember those who lost everything, who lost their lives 2 years ago. It is also a day to remember us that when we talk about climate justice, we do not talk about something abstract that does not touch the well-being of many people in the world. We are used to discuss if climate justice is something as a pact, as an agreement, a deal between generations, which of course it is, or if it is something that deals among members of the international community, of even members of the society that we belong to. Of course, it is all of that. But climate justice also relates to very concrete aspects of the day-to-day life, or even the day-to-day life from life to death. And I think that this is part of what Frans was also trying to stress. It is not only the main purpose to indicate that we need to devote an homage to those that lost their lives even without knowing, being conscious that what it was happening, heat waves, flooding, was something related to climate, is that we know what this means, we know how to act, and we need to act. We need the hope, we need to act. We need to say to those that fear climate change in such a deep manner that they get frozen, they get contesting even the fact that climate change does exist, that this is not the wisest manner to deal with something that creates fear, that raises fear among human beings. We need to think that this is something that is ongoing, because for a very long time we did a development that was not compatible with climate security, but today we know how to react and how to play differently. And we need to be among those people that have the fear to react, to fight climate, to contest scientific facts, to contest researchers, that what we are playing with is much more than a dialectic discussion between different people. We are talking about life and death. We are talking about food security. We are talking about, as George Lakoff was saying, being the polar bears in the room. We are talking about the capacity, the energy of the human beings to react against climate change. And sometimes we get into such a small, detailed discussion that we tend to forget the most important thing, that this is not something that it is going to disappear just because we don't like what we see. We need to be quite activist, quite vocal. We need to join forces. This is not a discussion between different political sentiments. This is not a sentiment different from different regions of the world. This is being human beings or not being. So I would like to express all the condolences, the sentiment, the love to those who are close to people who are not here today because of the effects of climate change. And I want to express also the full commitment of the institution that I represent today, the 27 governments of these 27 member states, but also, I'm sure, talking also on behalf of all of you and many people in many other places of the world, to commit, to engage, to do our utmost of our capacity and efforts to be sure that this day could be the day to remember people that are not with us, but also a day to remember all the improvements that we are capable to do, so to avoid people not being with us. Thank you so much for thinking about this possibility, thinking about the possibility to join in this common effort, and of course this global commemoration coming from Europe is something to share with all of you, but it is something to combat together. Thank you so much.
I then invite Vice President Marc from the European Parliament.
Dear Executive Vice President, dear Deputy Prime Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a big honor for me to represent today the European Parliament. Our President, Roberta Metsola, apologizes for not being with you, and she asked me to do that, and I'm very happy to be here at this important ceremony. You know, tackling climate change is already in our treaty of the European Union, and this is very important. Before I was a member of the European Parliament, I come from national politics, and I know how important it is in our member states that we got this incentive coming from Brussels to do environmental policies. And I think in most of our member states we wouldn't have that legislation if it wouldn't be for the work which has been done by the Commission, by the Council, and by the European Parliament. We voted this 15th of June a resolution in the European Parliament where we called for an annual day for the victims of the global climate crisis to be established. And it's wonderful to see here now that the three institutions, they are sharing this idea. And I think, as Frans Timmermans also said, this should not be only a European day, but we should have it should be a global day, because both the North and the South signed the 2030 agenda. So we are giving the incentive, but I hope this will be a day which will be celebrating the victims, not only in Europe. You mentioned them, they are more and more in the news, but also the victims in other parts of the world. So I would also like to say that I was very active during the conference on the future of Europe. You know, this conference where 900 citizens were chosen and discussed about the future of Europe. 1/3 of these citizens were young people between 16 and 25. Plus we had a multilingual digital platform where people could react. And what was the biggest worries of the Europeans? Number one and number two was climate change and social inequalities. The SDG agenda, that is what people are worried about in Europe. And therefore we have this responsibility that we should not get tired and that we should continue working towards having better legislation, better protecting our planet. And our planet, as I said before, and as we all know, is not only our little small European continent. We also know that we had a big victory yesterday in the European Parliament. And I am coming from the Parliament, and when you represent the President, you can only talk about the official position of the Parliament. Well, now the official position of the Parliament is that we supported the nature restoration law. I think this is important legislation, and I think all the colleagues working on it in the Parliament will be happy to come into the negotiations with the two of you, and I'm sure that we will have successful legislation at the end. Let me now make sure that also from the Parliament side, of course, we pay tribute to all the victims, to the parents and who lost their children, to children who lost their parents during incidents due to the climate crisis. We are with them and we will continue supporting them. And I think this is a very important day. So thank you very much for inviting the Parliament. Thank you very much also for the wonderful musical program. I believe, Frans, you chose that. It's excellent, and thank you so much. And I'm really excited also to signing the declaration. Thank you very much.
Having heard from the three EU institutions, I would now like to invite Selvin Hart, the Special Advisor to the UN Secretary General, to make remarks of support on the behalf of the United Nations.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, Executive Vice President, Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, colleagues. And please let me convey on behalf of the Secretary General his full support to this commemoration of the Day of the Victims, for the victims of the global climate crisis. And this is a sad day for all of us, but especially for those who lost a loved one or a friend some 2 years ago. One of the sad realities of the climate crisis is that those that have contributed the least to the climate crisis are already paying the heaviest price and are already bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. The frequency and intensity of climate-related disasters is increasing globally. No country is immune. It's happening on every continent, in every region, and in every country. And yet, global emissions continue to rise. Despite what we're seeing, global emissions continue to rise. The use of fossil fuels continue to increase. And the scale of the investments that are absolutely and urgently needed to protect lives and safeguard livelihoods, they're not being made at the absolute scale that is needed. So the good news is that we're the first generation that know with certainty the impact of our actions on the global climate system. And we're the first generation that can actually do something about it to solve the climate crisis. But it requires leaders to act now, as Frans said, and to take and make the decisions and choices that protect the public interest rather than protect the interests of those who continue to profit from carbon pollution. So on this day to commemorate those victims of the climate crisis, we must commit to act now, to act boldly and act with a sense of urgency. We cannot and must not condemn young people and future generations to a future they cannot fix. We cannot pass on a planet to young people in future generations that is broken beyond repair. We have a moral obligation to act, and we have a moral obligation to act now. So I urge you to use this day and to use this moment to raise your voices and use whatever tools are at your disposal, whether you're a parliamentarian, a policy maker or a decision maker to push for urgent and ambitious responses to the climate crisis. We know what to do. We have the tools to fix this, but we need leaders to act, and we need them to act now. So this is the one thing that we owe the victims, those victims that lost their lives, whose lives were cut short 2 years ago. And those victims around the world who every day are losing their lives, who are losing their livelihoods from the climate crisis. We owe them this. We must act now, and we must do everything that it takes to respond to a climate crisis and pass on to future generations a planet that is more secure and a planet that is healthier. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Selvin. I would like to invite the three principals to take their places at the signature table. It doesn't matter. The European Day for the Victims of the Global Climate Crisis has been established. We will conclude with a musical performance, When I'm Laid in Earth. Thank you for your participation, and thank you for your support.